Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner studio. With me is Stephen Hudak. He is our local author in Front Royal, written several books, and we're going to talk about his new book. Mark, let's get he'll get a picture of your book cover here. It's always good to plug the book.
Perfect.
And we'll talk about your first book.
Okay.
And I know you've been on tour with that one already, but we'll talk about that. Stephen's going to be at the Royal Oak Bookshop on May 25th.
Correct.
And be talking about things, meet and greet, sign some of your books. Tammy down there does a great job of trying to promote our local authors.
Absolutely.
And get them in. It's kind of a unique place, isn't it? You've been there before.
Many times. I mean, I just love old books and old bookstores. So even if you don't buy mine, come down there and just smell.
I was going to say, take the ambiance in.
Right. And pick up some classics. Wonderful place.
There it is. These bookshops are disappearing.
Unfortunately,
around America.
Unfortunately.
All right, so Stephen, tell us a little bit about your background. I know this is just a part-time job for you. You have a real job.
I do. I have a full-time job. I've been with our company now for 33 years, and it's a company called Varco Prudent Buildings, and we build like large steel buildings, large steel structures. And so I mainly teach engineering classes, a lot of technical type stuff. So I started taking some writing classes at Lord Fairfax, probably about 2003, I guess. And I just kind of fell in love with it, and it's just a different way to express some things.
Sure.
So so many different classes, and short stories would come along, and then just these ideas and so forth. And then in 2004, my granddaughter was born, and as you kind of alluded, that changes your life.
It does change your life. Grandkids seem like, they grow like weeds, though.
That's right. That's right. And you might know the Irma Bombeck saying,
right?
If she'd known how wonderful grandkids were, she'd had them first.
That's right. Exactly.
So, but yeah, it's definitely. And so I had, before Bailey was born, I had been working on some short stories. And kind of the funny thing is, the people that would read it, a lot of the families and friends, they said, "Wow, these things are dark." But it's a lot of it was ideas, suggestions from our English classes, and so you would kind of follow that and see where the characters would go. And so then when my granddaughter was born, our mother-in-law had lived with us at that time. And I would always tell Bailey these bedtime stories and make things up. And she's such a, kids are pure and innocent.
Oh, they want you to tell them stories, and they don't even really care what they are, do they?
No.
They just want to delay going to bed.
Exactly. And it was funny. Every story started with, once upon a time, there's a beautiful little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes.
They look just like you, right?
Yeah. And so they would start this way, and all of a sudden I would be adding some things, and there might be a monster that appears. And she would say, "Oh, Papa, it's a good monster, isn't it?" She don't want a bad story.
Exactly.
So my mother-in-law, Nancy, she suggested you need to record these for her so she can have something in the future. So I started, writing these stories down, and I would say to Bailey, I said, "We need some of your artwork here." I said, "This is going on the story. Give me some kind of piece of artwork." So she would draw me some stick figures, or some watercolors with big colorful roses and stuff, and so that was really fun to work with on her. So we did that one, and then a couple years later, Rumpelstiltskin is one of our favorite, fable characters. So we wanted to give Rumpelstiltskin some redeeming qualities. So we kind of wrote Rumpelstiltskin's Christmas, kind of her and I, and she kind of helped with that a little bit, the art too, but more so she helped with the plots. But she was still kind of young then, and she wanted to put in these unicorns and princesses, and I said, well, we couldn't fit all that stuff in there to make it work. So that was fun too.
They call that creative writing.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. And her influence, if without her influence, who knows what I would have ended up with there.
Something that no one would want to read.
Probably not. So I kind of did that, and I did some things with the company, like some historical type stuff, recording some of the company history.
Right.
And I got into some nonfiction. Then I started taking some more like memoir type writing classes from Lord Fairfax, and I think just kind of developed. And then with my regular job, I started taking more leadership classes so that it could help me teach our employees, and plus the classes I do with the college could help that. And so I just was writing these things down there, and I thought I need to collect those and put them in a book, because the title of Dreams and Leadership, it came up the first semester. It was an online class, and the Professor Patterson said, he said, you need to start a dream book. And he said it's like don't really think what are things right now, but what would you like things to be? Think big. He said, dream big. And so a lot of this is, my thoughts on, leadership and teamwork and communication and just learning and education as it is.
And it says here, learning to lead and sharing along the way.
Exactly.
That's right,
Yeah.
along the way. Just
Yeah, because, my philosophy is I strive to be a lifelong learner.
Exactly.
And that's what I try to get our employees to do, and the people I work with at the college. Don't stop learning. Just keep learning new things and keep growing.
When we were in our other company, National Media Services, we do a lot of audio books, and
Okay.
in the years past when we were doing cassettes, and you always had that turn your automobile into a university.
Okay.
Yes. As you listen to these things, and
Exactly.
you don't realize how much time we spend in our cars,
Yes.
and we're listening to the radio, and when you can be listening to a CD or a tape back then about leadership. You pick a topic, and you really, like you say, it turns your car into a university, and how much you can learn in those hour commutes every day.
Absolutely. And all of a sudden, you're there, and you don't realize the hours
Exactly.
gone.
Right.
And
I don't know about you, but when I'm listening to these things, and that's why you get these ideas, and next thing you know, I'm off when my brain is going somewhere else, so I got to listen to it again.
Exactly.
My wife always kicks me. We heard that 6 times already. I said, yeah, but I didn't hear it the first 5 times.
That's right.
I was thinking about something else. I'm sure it's kind of like your book here. I mean, I'm dreaming. I'm thinking about how can I apply that technique to our company or to my life or whatever.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden, like you said, you should write these things down, because when you wake up in the morning, they are gone.
Perfect. That's right. Yep. And one of my former bosses, and I call him my unofficial mentor, but he inbred this lifelong learning, philosophy within us.
And it's a shame, because we'll interrupt you there, but it's a shame that people, like, they graduate from high school or maybe even graduate from college, and then they think their education is over. No. And that's really the beginning.
It is.
It's really the beginning.
Yep.
I'm sure you see that now in these leadership classes you're teaching. You really are at the beginning of your education.
Absolutely. And when my first semester at Penn State, the one professor said, you may not use 60 to 80% of what you're going to learn here. He said, but what you will learn to do is how to find out the answers, how to research, and how to get excited about learning.
Right.
And and that stuck with me. That was in 1982.
Right.
So.
Right. You always hear the stories. Well, you'll never learn how. I never use algebra. We use algebra every day. We just don't know it.
That's right.
Right.
That's true. And then me being in the engineering field, I use algebra and trig. Plus, my granddaughter is in 8th grade, so she's taking algebra.
They teach it different now. I tell you, I try to help my grandkids in school, and what's the book say? It's totally a different method of teaching of mathematics and things.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your book about leadership.
Sure.
Because I know you're an adjunct professor at Lord Fairfax.
Yes.
Leadership is one of those skills that can apply through your entire life, where people think about it being in work and being in a position of ownership or of leadership, of management of some sort, but really, it affects you more than you realize.
Well, it is, and it's so obvious when leadership is lacking. I think it's John Maxwell that said, the first person you lead is yourself.
Right.
So if you're not an effective self-manager, self-leader, people look up to you. And if they kind of see what you're doing, and if you're doing things the wrong way, if your voice and your actions don't match, well, they know easily.
Right.
And your trust is quickly broken.
It is. So what's your favorite story in this book here? I see you've got a lot of them. I mean, and that's what I like about a book. I like to read. Sometimes you get a 450-page book and they're like forever to get it read. Other times you read little short stories, and you've got the concept, you move right along, and then you don't put it down, because let's see what the next one is. Let's see what the next one is.
And that's an excellent point. I appreciate that. It's I found long ago when I started the writing, I don't have, I guess, the time and patience and endurance for endurance for like a novel.
Right.
I just don't have that drive.
Right.
But short stories and thoughts and ideas, I can kind of get those together there. So,
Okay.
So this here, you don't have to start at page 1 and read. You can flip through the table of contents,
find a
something
picture
that might interest you,
or a headline that you like,
and read that chapter.
Right.
And just kind of pick up and learn some things there.
Something you can take and can grasp it and apply it and relate to it, probably because it's one idea, and then get our head wrapped around it.
Yeah, yeah. As far as my favorite chapter, and again, I like to kind of be open for the people I work with there.
Right, right.
And whenever we do the leadership classes, I have them develop a personal leadership philosophy.
Right.
So typically at the college, we get a group in there and they go through these series of classes. And I like to have them start with thinking about their philosophy of leadership. What does leadership mean to them? And we kind of first look at the values. Well, what's important to you? Don't really think about the work, but what is really important to you? Your family, your faith, things like that. And then you can kind of build up there, because a lot of people don't really think about, well, I might have a leadership philosophy, but I found whenever I started thinking about it more and writing it down, and when you write it down, that's where it really becomes.
Exactly.
Because
Right.
it's like you're making a promise to yourself.
Right. And like you said, the word, leadership is a word that we don't really use in our vocabulary every day,
Exactly.
and we may have a concept that really isn't true. And I noticed you said it. What is leadership? And it's a broad word.
That's right.
And sometimes, just changing the word a little bit, people can relate to it or the actions of it. So
Yep.
it's an interesting. We have some clients that teach quote leadership.
Okay.
And it's again when you start listening to them and listening to their talks and things, and you're saying, wow. I didn't realize it included so many things.
Exactly.
So how is it in your class courses? Lord Fairfax has all sorts of ages, in the
Yes.
classes. Are you seeing young people, or is it part of a curriculum, or is it
Well, I'm part of what they call the workforce solutions.
Okay,
Where it's
right.
kind of like open enrollment classes, or they go into an industry. Like, tomorrow I'm teaching a business writing class, which is an enrollment class. A lot of people get the online, or they get the catalog from
right,
college.
right,
And they can go through and pick some classes there. And that's where, find something that interests you. And I guess a little side thing back to my mentor there.
Right.
He encouraged me. When I was first started with our company, it was engineering, so I was really pursuing those engineering classes.
right.
Because my Penn State education was mechanical, and now we're in civil, so I was trying to get more towards civil. And it didn't take long to realize, oh man, I can't see myself doing this technical stuff the rest of my life.
Right.
So I'm kind of doing it, but I'm not a certified engineer. But yeah, you just got to keep on going.
Well, I'll give you you mentioned that when we were out in Tucson, Arizona, they have the General Electric or Hughes Aircraft or Raytheon now. They kind of buying each other out there,
Yeah.
but they build those Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah.
Well, my neighbor worked there. He was an architect, and I'm
Okay.
thinking, what is an architect working at building missiles?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that, but you said you're not an engineer. So when they sold it, Raytheon bought it, they fired all the guys, and they brought in their engineers from San Diego. Well, after about 2 or 3 months, they couldn't get the missile to fly. They could build it, but it wouldn't fly, And so they had to hire these non-engineers
Yeah.
to go back in and show them how to build something, because it's art. It's not just, part A to part B goes together. And it's just kind of like building buildings. It's
Yeah.
really the same way.
Yeah.
You
That's
mentioned
true.
another thing I want to, and I can relate to, and people ask me like, well, what classes should I take in school? When I was in high school, my class, I wanted to get out as soon as I could,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right? I'm sure we all did.
Yeah.
Now I look back, and when I want to hire somebody, or you look at employees, and I tell them, look, if I could do it over again, I would take all the English classes I could take.
Yes.
I would take all the math classes I could take that I enjoyed. I said, and whatever. I said, if you're going to be, the last thing I want to hire is a business person. I mean, because the things they teach them in the school might work at IBM, and it doesn't work in entrepreneurship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I said, so I can teach skills, but I can't
right.
teach you
That's
how
right.
to get along. I can't
Exactly.
teach you how to carry on a conversation. I can't teach you to be a leader, right?
That's true. Yep.
And especially, I was in the Air Force for 11 years, and people relate to that. I said, well, you look at officers, unless you're going to be a doctor or an engineer, they really want to hire, they want people that are political science, English, history.
Mm-hmm.
They want people that can get along,
Yeah, well-rounded,
and
exactly.
well-rounded.
Teams, working teams.
Exactly, know how
Are
to
they good
relate.
fit? Yep.
But people get narrowed into that major, And as you
Yes.
probably well know, when you hire, rarely do they ever ask you what your major's in. You just got to check that box off. Do you have a college degree? Yes. All right, next. You know, unless it's really required as far as skill level.
Yes.
And even if it is, they're going to teach you new skills when you get into the job.
Yeah.
So I try to relate and focus on people. I said, focus on these skills of how to write, how to communicate.
Exactly.
Because regardless of whether we're putting it on paper or typing it in the computer or whatever it is, it's still communication.
Exactly.
And that is a skill that you've mastered. And I think everybody says they have a book in them.
Well, we're always working on it. I wouldn't say master.
But you found out that this writing is really something that you didn't realize you enjoyed it so much.
Yeah. I mean, I started with engineering. I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. But I found if I had to do it all over again, you mentioned like what to take, I would probably be an English major.
Yep.
And I might be unemployed. I kid with my granddaughter. I said, I'm a chubby, starving artist. I said, we're rather rare. Usually we're much skinnier.
Yes. But it's great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and you mentioned what classes to take. The mentor that I mentioned, Ed Champagne, early on, he just encouraged us. He said, take classes. We need for our training group, we needed a website. So he said, hey, I want you to take web design. I had never thought about that. So I did. But then I was taking classes. I said, Ed, there's this, I think it was like a Southern literature class I'd like to take. And our company has a wonderful tuition refund program.
Right.
I said, but I don't really need more English for my engineering degree. He says, go ahead and take it. He said, if you take it, you'll learn something. A better person is a better employee.
Exactly.
So he was always really pushing the learning there. And as far as what to learn, of course, the education, communication, and it's almost like you read a chapter in there. You mentioned about, okay, they want to know what your degree is. But John P. Cotter says, hire for attitude, train for skill.
Exactly.
Because people can learn things quickly there, but is the person a good fit for your company?
Right.
A good team? Are people going to get along together?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My son went to college, and he started off, and he took he could do quadratic equations in his head, right? But had to count on his fingers to go 7 + 4, you know. But and he highly in science and math and except, but he's taken, I think his first year in school he took 21 or 22 credit hours or something, right? And he struggled along with it, but and he kind of got bored with it, and then he kind of dropped out. I said, well, Michael, why don't you just take something you enjoy, like basket weaving or something? It doesn't really matter, the skill. He said, well, now you tell me, But, he wanted, thinking that path that you have to go in and take these hardcore classes. And really, I don't think people really realize 20, it's kind of like your parents, how smart, when you got 30, your parents really turned out to be smart, right?
Absolutely.
And so those are the kind of skills we need to learn younger.
That's right.
And younger.
That's right. And your son is fortunate to have that support system there. I was the first one in my family to go to college, and it was never talked about through high school, not really expected. It was almost like the small
Right,
town
you're going
in
to be a blue
Pennsylvania.
collar worker and move on.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and look at that. But then
You're
I
working a
worked for a
steel
year
mill.
after college, or after high school, and I thought, man, I can't be doing this. It took me another year to save up enough money to get started at Penn State.
Right.
But again, because I was the first one, my parents were very encouraging. They said, but you need to get something you're going to get a job with.
Right.
And that's kind of why I pursued the engineering aspect.
Right. Well, my daughter now her and her husband are teaching school in Malaysia.
Okay.
But she went to Lord Fairfax and got an associate's degree. And it seemed like, she didn't really want to go to college, but she kind of got her husband's a teacher, and they kind of got together, and he motivated her. Next thing you know, she's going to WGU, taking all this online, and that's another opportunity that we have
Absolutely.
that we didn't have when we went to school.
Yeah.
How you could do all these things online, and she finished her last 2 years and 18 months online, and now she's working on her master's degree all online.
Excellent.
And she's living in Malaysia, and she's going to Liberty University. So now these education opportunities are really all around us. When I was in school, we took correspondence courses. We didn't have online.
Yes.
I did physics by correspondence. I did trigonometry by mailing it in.
I did calculus through that. Ooh, that was rough.
And calculus, I did that. So yeah, I did an engineering class all by correspondence courses, and people think, how in the world?
You do the homework, and
I
put it in an envelope.
And wait a week or two before to get it back.
Yes.
So those days have changed. So we really have a lot of opportunities I like your idea about writing. I think you can see that's one thing about here. When the phones ring, we should turn them off, I guess.
That's right. While you're doing that, I'll turn mine off.
All right. We just keep letting the thing run here.
That's right.
That's just part of the adventure.
Right, exactly.
But they say we all have a book, and nowadays, publishing is a lot different than it used to be. Cause
it is, and that's self-published.
Self-published, and really, there's another local artist here that is writing some books, and he's doing this last one he's writing a book about the Nazis in Rome or something, right? And he spent a year over in Rome and is doing all this, and but he sells it. We self-published the first book, and he finally got it published. He has a publisher, but the idea was it's a lot easier to sell that book when you're selling books.
Yeah.
The publisher says, "Oh, you've already sold 1,000 of these.
Yes.
Oh, we'll look at you now because
Exactly.
everybody's we're going to sell 1 million copies on the internet, right? And it takes, but when someone's looking at it, they're saying, hey, that might be something worthwhile.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and people that can do writing for a living, I have so much respect for. It's
Exactly.
tough. I mean, you need a literary agent, and when I was messing around with my first book in 2004, I never really thought about, trying to get it published. But I kind of went a different route back then. Things are so much easier now.
They are.
But I kind of looked at, okay, literary agents cost this much. They want a percentage of this.
Everybody has their hand out. Well,
exactly.
they do a service, though. I mean,
That's true.
Editing your book is...
That's true. And again, I go back to my mentor because I've learned so much about him. But for a long time, I've been after him. I said, Ed, and he would always tell these wonderful stories, and he just traveled the world and met so many different people. And every class he had would have like a different story relating to the topic. I said, you need to get these into a book. So I've been after him for years and years. And then one of our other guys in our Arkansas office, he kind of did some customer service type essays. And over like the course of the year, he was just putting these together. And for our company, once a week, he would send these out in the email. And they're usually like, a page or two. And I said, Randall, why don't we put these in a book for you? So I kind of helped him edit, and we sent his book to my mentor, and then he called me up, and Ed says, we need to talk. He said, I got Randall's book in my hand. This is exactly what I want to do. He said, I never did this before. I know you've been after me, but he said, I thought it was just so expensive, hard to do.
Right.
He said, what do I need to do? I said, you write, I'll edit. And so we did that for about a year. He would just send me these stories, we would talk about them, and we finally got his book together.
Right.
And he's been in the consulting thing for a long time, but he says he goes into people now with his book, and it's like a
Instant
resume.
credibility, isn't it?
That's right.
People, it's like being published. There's like you're an author.
Yeah.
As compared to, even though you did it yourself, there's still that instant credibility. Even if it doesn't matter if it's a children's book, the fact that you did it. That's great.
Yeah, you have to have some discipline because there's probably 2 years worth of writing in this one. And the other one, my first one, is probably 3 years. And when I did the history book for the company, that was probably about three plus years.
Yeah, it takes a while.
It does.
Well, and you mentioned about writing. That's why we sit here and I interview you on the camera, because if I had to write this interview out, I'd never get it written.
Oh, yeah. And I like this. I mean, I've never done this before. But
Well,
I like
it's different. It's different. And
give and take, back and
forth. Give and take.
Yeah.
But another thing, when you got a book, and we'll talk about two things I just want to mention, is you just sit down like we're doing and talk and have someone interview you. Well, because you have the wealth of knowledge in your head, but when you sit in front of that computer and try to type it out, you've seen the cliches of, well, chapter 1, and then 3 months later it's still on chapter 1, right? And so, but it's easy. If I ask you a question, that's like you've done. You've talked 15 minutes on something that if I ask you to write that out, it'd be maybe 2 sentences, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I tell people. I said, sit down and record it, and then we transcribe it, and then we edit it.
Yes.
And it's amazing how the technology we can do today that was very difficult 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is very easy today. I can do, just like we do this video, I'll take this video, upload the audio to the program, and in less than 5 minutes, I'll have a transcript of this here, of this audio. So for $2.12, I won't even have to sit and pay someone to type it. So it's, those tools are available.
Yes.
And another thing, and you mentioned your mother-in-law. My mother-in-law lives with us. She's 95.
Oh, great.
And what I want to do but she's now tells stories.
Okay.
And I'm saying, I'm getting that video camera out.
Yes.
And videotape these things with your grandchildren
Yes.
and or your parents. And it's amazing the wealth. We were talking, my wife said the other day, I didn't know that about my mom.
Yeah.
You know, she was, of course, as you get older, you kind of go back a little farther, you know, in those, you know,
That's true.
the current, but
That's
there's
true.
a wealth of information that you will treasure. We transfer a lot of videotapes and things to DVDs for
Okay.
people, and
Okay.
they'll bring in their old tapes, and so I haven't seen that in 20 years, but they know there's some value. When they see it, it brings tears to their eyes, especially if their loved ones have passed on.
Yeah.
And so again, they're books. Those are things
right.
that, and you know, the Library of Congress is doing that thing with veterans about let's talk to our old veterans, and you can submit it. We've interviewed some veterans of World War
Okay.
II. I mean, they're passing away at high numbers because
Yeah.
they're all in their 90s, and so there's books there.
That's right.
And you talk about the things you do. And I was reading something about you online about one of your books where you were sitting on an airplane and all of a sudden you seen some guy with a funny hat and there was a story.
Yeah, and I always carry a little tiny notebook with me because you mentioned if you don't write some things
Oh, yeah,
down.
you lose it.
Plus, when you get older, I mean, we're both pretty young yet. But as
Oh,
you
yeah,
get older,
we're
you
young.
tend to have to write some things down.
Right.
So more, and that notebook, I mean, I write some things down. Of course, I've scribbled things I don't have no idea what it means.
Well, and I've done that before. I get up, I leave a notebook by my bed, and I'll wake up and I'll write something down.
Yeah.
And I get up in the morning and I try to read it. I don't have a clue what I
Bread,
wrote.
milk, what?
Well, it's great, Stephen. About like I said, I really like people that have the skill and the time and the effort to set and have these dreams in their heads that they can put on paper. This is like a legacy. You don't really
Appreciate that,
realize that down the road when your children and their children and their
Yeah,
children,
yeah.
this is something that'll live on. And the people that you don't even know that pick up your book and it can affect their lives.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. It just takes one little, out of all these pages, maybe one sentence in the book can
Yeah.
trigger a thought
Yeah.
that will lead someone down a completely different path.
Yeah, and I mentioned leadership philosophy. If one person thinks about, what do they think about? Maybe not leadership, but what do they value? What is important? What do they consider their purpose in life? And it kind of, when you think about that, it kind of maybe changes your focus.
Right.
Because we get, in our daily lives, we just kind of, rush here and there and doing this, but you need to sit down. And in my classes, everybody learns differently, at different paces. So I like to build in some reflection time, I call it, where a person can think about what we've talked about in their own ways instead of rushing from subject to subject to
Sure,
subject.
exactly.
So one person might pick it up like this, another person has to consider it, think about it.
I think maybe we need to push some of these things we've learned now farther down into the education train.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
I always talk about money. We never teach people about money, we teach them how to count change.
Yeah.
But now you put it in the computer and, they can, don't mess me up now.
Exactly.
But we don't teach people about wealth and wealth building.
That's right.
And how to get along with people. We just
Yeah.
assume they learn that.
Yep.
They learn it from their parents, and sometimes that isn't a good thing to learn.
That's true.
So, and this leadership concept maybe is something that we really need to think about. Why wait till we're in college to learn something that we should have learned in kindergarten?
That's right.
Remember the book, Everything I Learned in
Yep.
Kindergarten? And when you read that, you're thinking, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those skill sets that we really develop our personality at such a young age that if we don't massage it and make it, firm it up there, we're going to lose it. And because like you said, I've known people that I've known much younger, and you know them now, and they're a completely different person.
Yeah.
And they, what's the saying about the books you read, the people I can't recall now, but
I kind of
it's the books you read and the
become
people you
company
meet,
keep.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so those things are true, and books are important. They've got us this far along in our life, and people say, oh, I don't read anymore. Well, we do, we just don't.
Yeah, a lot of it's unfortunately on social media.
Oh.
And
Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this video, we're going to put it on social media. See.
Excellent.
And we're
I love social media.
I know, that's right. Stephen's going to be at the Royal Oak Bookshop on May 25th.
Yeah.
Is that from the 1 to
1 o'clock to 4.
1 to 4 o'clock? And if you've never been to the Royal Oak Bookshop, it's on South Royal Avenue here in Front Royal, and it's great. They've got all sorts of books in there. You got a little path you got to walk through. It's a very small place, but there must be a million books in that place. And the ambiance, the smell. I mean, it's just the bookstore, and there's nothing like it in the country. People drive here from all over to go to that bookshop.
That's right.
They do, and there's something.
Say hello to the cats. Scratch them behind the ears.
That's right, exactly. And Stephen will be there. You can talk to him there. Buy his book, of course. Get him to autograph it for one of your children to read. And it'll be great. I really appreciate you, Stephen, coming in.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time for this. I mean, it means a lot to me. I've never done this before, but I enjoyed it.
Well, it's great. And like I say, we're trying to get the word out to our local authors and things in general. And I really like the topic. I'm really into that. I'll take you to my office and I'll show you my book collection.
Okay.
People say, did you really read all those books? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
I haven't read as many here lately. The newspaper's keeping me busy.
That's right.
But it's true. I love these type of books. So really appreciate it. Thanks again.
You're quite welcome.